Hello, viewers, and welcome to yet another episode of We Need to Crypto Talk. Today, me, Yashu Gola, the CMO of NewsBTC.com, will be speaking to Nicholas Gregory, the founder of CommerceBlock. Today, he will join us and will explain us that what his platform is all about and his little stunt in China. Hello, Nicholas. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Well, I'm doing fine. I'm calling
It's a
you.
lovely
I'm
rainy
calling you
day in
like
London.
very early in the morning. I really apologize for that.
It's fine. It's fine. We're a remote team, so we have people. I'm in London. We have people in Israel, and we
Oh,
have people in New York. So it's 24/7 for us. We have no.
and
It's time and sleeping patterns go out the window when you have a distributed team like this. So
well, it takes that much effort to create a wonderful blockchain project, and I'm sure you have a good one. So, but before we begin to talk about it, could you tell me something about your background in the blockchain community?
yeah, sure. So I'm an engineer by trade, a software developer. That's what I trained in college. Um, I decided to, at some point, originally I worked a bit in Silicon Valley during the dot-com boom. Then I came back to London and I ended up working in finance, basically working on the derivatives desk, writing software to price derivatives and various exotic instruments, mainly for Merrill Lynch. And then I had a small stint at JP Morgan. I guess around 2012, I started hearing about Bitcoin. I mean, I may have heard about it earlier. I mean, I think most technical people that were doing Unix-based development would have heard of it. It was pushed quite a few times on Slashdot, I remember. But it wasn't until around 2012 that I started looking at it seriously. And, it was basically a little hobby. It was an interesting distributed system. I'd be honest, I wasn't 100% sold on it, mainly because of the 10-minute block time. When people started saying, distributed cash, I go, okay, how's this going to work with the 10 minutes? But that was like me being a bit, not going into depth. Then about 2 years later, I think when the hype went, and then when the Mount Box, I really started to research it a lot, and it quickly became a hobby. I started going to Bitcoin meetups in New York because I was based in Manhattan at the time. Started making Bitcoin friends who were more involved in the protocol. And in 2015, I decided to quit banking and work for startups. And I ended up doing a lot of work for some boutique consultancies on Bitcoin and it's blockchain technically, but it was 99% Bitcoin.
Hmm.
And through there, I was working really on the OTC space, helping people in that department, but from a software development point of view.
Well, that's a very interesting background you've got, I must say that. So, how did the idea of launching Commerce Block ever conceived? I mean, what prompted you?
Oh, so yeah, I was working. I was basically working freelance around 2015. I decided to leave banking. I really got into Bitcoin. I kind of really liked it from an engineering point of view. So I was based in New York and I was working for a few boutique OTC shops. And one of the problems we started seeing with Bitcoin is that it's a wonderful decentralized currency. And we're all sold on that. That's why we're talking right now. But the moment you want to start doing real trades, like have a concept of an invoice, a receipt, or in the problems I was looking like a bill of ladings document, you're back to using a centralized system. Whether that's if I was to sell you my car, I'd have to basically store that data somewhere, and it's not necessarily locked up to the Bitcoin. So me and my co-founder, we had a few ideas on how to solve this. We spent time with some of the core developers on Reddit, posting questions. And one of them, I think, a meetup in York pointed us to this contract to hatch protocol, which at a high level, imagine I want to sell you my car. I can literally take an invoice and then use my address and then generate a new address. I can then give you that address and then give you that invoice. You can now validate that invoice against that address. And if I was to change anything in that invoice, it breaks it. You now can take that address and basically sign it with your private keys, it's basically sending money to it, knowing that you're paying for that invoice. And then, when I get the money, I need the invoice and my private key to release it. So that means if I didn't send you the car at a later date or there was some dispute, we have a permanent record in a blockchain. And it's very useful because when I was working in banks were looking at crypto, but one of the issues is the privacy of data, and that's where a lot of this private blockchains like Hyperledger and R3 have come about. They don't necessarily want their data public, but what this gives us is a situation where you can use public blockchains like an Ethereum, a Bitcoin, or Litecoin to not necessarily store the data but validate the data, which is what we want. I'm sure you don't want your transactions details public, but you want to be able to go back in time and validate it in case there's any dispute resolution or issues like that. And we honestly felt that this solves one of the issues of crypto not being mainstream.
But that's interesting. And but I get this sense of feeling that your platform is constantly relying on public blockchains in order to function. So don't you think there is any inherent risk to it?
Well, I mean, I have two answers for that. If we're back in 1999, you don't really want to be in the intranet business, and that's how I see private blockchains. And the forks, some people like them, some people don't. Depends where you sit. But it doesn't. The blockchains are still immutable. So if I was to do a transaction for you, like sell you, something like my car, and there's a fork, I mean, the transaction is going to be in both blockchains. I mean, there hasn't. I mean, I think Ethereum did it last year with the DAO pack, but there hasn't been much. There will probably be more forks in the future in Bitcoin, but the likelihood, I mean, if the blockchain becomes mutable, then it's probably over. So I think forks are something we're going to have to deal with. Probably next year you're going to see a lot of forks, but I don't. It's the immutability that makes us successful. If blockchains become mutable, then it's over. But no one's talking about forking and making a mutable blockchain. When that happens, then I am actually worried.
Well, but there is also another risk I forgot to mention in my last question. It's related to privacy. I mean, public blockchain lists all sort of data right there in front of public eye, and you are trying to offer an enterprise-grade solution. I do not understand that why enterprises would be interested in making their private data public or their private dealings public to the entire audience. How do you solve that issue?
But that's what we're kind of solving, because blockchains is not necessarily about having your data public. It's about transparency. If I take my address and then generate a new address based on some metadata, that new address has no linkage to the old address. It's based on that metadata. And, to the naked eye, when people look at the blockchain, they're not going to see that I sold you my car, because you have privacy there. You would need to know the original transaction. You would need to have the original invoice, and you'd need to know what to look for. So we actually are creating a privacy-centric layer. Because basically, I'm taking my address, generating a new address based on metadata, giving that to you, and then you're basically signing money back into it. But we don't know what the metadata is. We don't know it's an invoice. We don't know it's a bill of lading document. We know nothing about that. However, if me and you get into a dispute later down the road because I didn't send you the goods I promised you, we can use that to prove it. But it's a one-way hash. We can prove data from the blockchain, but we can't take data and find where it is in the blockchain. And that's the whole point. And the analogy I use is big businesses. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when big businesses did not want to use the internet, and they were building intranets because they had the same concerns. And I think this protocol answers the same controls. We'll use the internet, which is public blockchains, but we'll keep our data private, but we'll be able to use transactions in public blockchains to validate our data, not the other way around.
Well, that's interesting. Which bring me to the next question. I mean, you said that you are creating this decentralized system, this ecosystem in which enterprises can deal with each other, and they have this metadata that can be stored on a blockchain. Is that what you're trying to say? That you have your own blockchain for that?
So let me misexplain. There's no data ever stored on the blockchain.
Right.
That's the whole point.
All right.
There's nothing there. It's just two addresses talking to each other, transacting. And that is the key thing. Now, prior to this, people had tried this in Bitcoin. I'm sure you things like colored coins, OmniLayer, and they were basically using opt-return, which is basically storing some sort of data on public blockchain. We store nothing. There's nothing there to link us. Just like if you were to...
So don't you think they can be... I mean, I'm sorry to cut you off. But don't you think there is any regulatory aspect to this entire process you're trying to build? I mean, anybody can exchange anything over your platform, and you won't have a clue about it. You mentioned a car, but it could be drugs. And so do you have any regulations at place to make sure that you're dealing with the right kind of enterprises, people, individuals?
Well, I mean, you could say that by any open source project. We're open source. I mean, anyone can download an open source project and use it for illicit purposes. I do think, the regulation's interesting. I don't think you can regulate the internet, and you can't regulate Bitcoin. But what you can regulate is the on-off ramps. So in our solution, if we have a customer that wants to use us and we, kind of build this technology for them, and they're like a UK or a proper regulated company, they will own that regulation on their on ramp and off ramp. We're not prohibiting that. I mean, we're adding a layer to the pipe. We're not basically controlling the pipe. And I don't think, it's like saying, could you regulate the internet? This is a public blockchain. It's the free for all. What you can do is help people be safe. So what we're doing is allow people to transact business, but keep their privacy, not make sure their data can't be used incorrectly or for illicit purposes. Because I think there's a need for public blockchains. There's transparency there. And, we want to know, you want to be safe. You want to be able to, you want provability. Intranets are probably more of a risk because we don't know what we're doing. If 5 companies have a private blockchain, how's that different than just having one centralized system? Yeah.
That's correct. That's really correct, actually. There's no point of having a centralized blockchain because it will be equivalent to a centralized database, and I really get that point.
Oracle have done a good job of building centralized databases. I don't know
they
why.
are actually, yeah.
I don't know what these private blockchains are achieving. Again,
I have to say sorry about the kids that are shouting in the background. It's a festival in India right now, so I cannot stop them from screaming into our conversation. So even apologize to my viewers. Sorry about the kids. They keep shouting these days, and they will burst some crackers. So Nicholas and I apologize for that. So moving on to the most more nitty-gritty part of this interview, the ICO actually. So are you having one?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we are.
Wow. So could you tell us more about it?
Yeah. So building on our protocol, which I think I was talking about, contract to hash, we decided to standardize that into a BIP. It's an informational BIP, so it's BIP 175, so it doesn't require change to any underlying blockchain, but it's a standard way of doing what I was describing to you, basically embedding metadata into addresses and kind of having that merchant-customer relationship. And the hope is that, we'll build infrastructure. We've got infrastructure. We have more businesses using that. And by having it as a BIP, maybe hardware wallets would support it. So when you put in your ledger key, it would understand the protocol, exchanges would understand it. So based on that, we do have use cases. We do have clients that want to use our technology. And, for us, we could have built our own protocol like EOS or Tezos, or we could have, there's various ways you can do this. And I guess we've taken, again, rather than like in the early days of the internet, where people, when they were looking at B2B, they built these complex protocols like Corba, DCOM, and then there was the whole XML SOAP stuff. We've probably, I'd say, gone for the more kind of like lightweight, reality-based approach, REST. We like federated sidechains. We think they're based on multi-sig, and they're a great container to run the smart contracts that we need for our customers. So how do you basically power? So what are we building? We're building a network of sidechains that are pegged at the moment to Bitcoin, but they could be pegged to Ethereum. We go where the liquidity is, not necessarily based on technology. So wherever there's liquidity, we want to run our sidechains to execute these smart contracts. A token makes a lot of sense. As I kind of alluded to you previously, Bitcoin has most currencies, crypto does have challenges using them in kind of like a real-time fashion, 10-minute block times, fluctuating transaction fees. At least with your own token, you can kind of manage against that. You have more control. So we would like to build a network of sidechains to basically execute these contracts. And we have clients in the real estate business, in a trade finance business, where we would basically build a layer for them so that they don't necessarily have to get involved in the nitty gritty of, say, Bitcoin or Ethereum. They can just use an API. So we're trying to take what are traditionally seen as commercial banking services and be a fintech solution provider. So does that mean we have a lot of knowledge about our customers? No, because if we build it as a sidechain, a federated sidechain, we don't actually own any data. We give the customers the keys. For example, we have a real estate customer. The sidechain will be operated with a few keys. The customer would have a key, their clients would have a key, a custodian would have a key. We're just executing this. And our software basically is open source. So anyone potentially could take our source code, join our network, and potentially kick us out. If they do a better job than we do, they can take our token and undercut us. And I think that's the challenge, because when I look at I mean, we spent a lot of time looking at tokenomics because some of the tokens didn't always make sense to me. They felt like, okay, you're bootstrapping an idea and you're basically doing, gift cards. You're giving free tokens. For a token to make sense, it's got to be a real token. And that to me was the network token. That means the value of the company isn't necessarily in the company, it's in the network you're building. And you're raising money to kind of build this network. But then the risk is someone like you could join our network, do a better job than me for my customers. And they're going to say, well, if Nick is charging, 5 CBTs to register a property on the blockchain and you're charging 4, why we, and that's the reality. And it's very much the way Bitcoin grew. Bitcoin grew, there was 1 or 2 miners. The early days, me and you could have mined on our laptops. Right. More efficient miners came out. The early miners went bankrupt. But Bitcoin still holds its value.
It's interesting to know that you're simply asking your competition to take your code and start competing with you.
But I think that's what's strange, actually. But that's what you sign up for. I think if you're going to do a token, you've got to really think about it and realize what you're signing up for. If I was just to basically say, this is a token for CommerceBlock to raise money, it's either a security or a gift card. And that, to me, I mean, we want to be long-term. We have existing clients. We're not, we kind of came into this before the ICO craze, and we have clients to look after, and we've got to convince them that this is the way to go. And that's what we believe in. So we believe in the open source community. We believe in building networks. I think when this is all done and dusted, we're in a bubble, but when the network kind of goes down, you're going to see protocols which have sustainability, that have built successful networks. That's what's going to be around. So.
Well, that's pretty much answers everything I was looking for. And but yes, I do have one question, and forgive me for asking. I mean, it's going to sound very funny. I read something about you going to China and teaching people martial arts, this sabbatical you took. What is it all about? I mean, people are trolling you.
Yeah, so I mean, I was always into like martial arts. I guess in 2008, in the financial crisis, I was at Merrill Lynch. It was the end of the world was happening. I asked my boss to take some time off. I wanted to do something different. I decided to go to the Shaolin Temple. It was tough. The food, the 8 hours of training a day, but it was a beautiful experience. And I was only there a month. I trained hard for it, but after 2 days I was in agony. But it was an experience. I mean, it was, just little things like the diet, not speaking. It was quite rural back then. Not many people speaking English. My nickname there was David Beckham because I was British. Yeah, they literally just called me Beckham. Which and then
you could kick ass. I mean. Perhaps.
Yeah. And then when I lived in New York, I've always been, I like it, I teach it. A few years ago, I was quite into it. I did a few reality TV shows. Some funny people have found that and decided to post that on Bitcoin Talk, which is great. I mean, but yeah.
So how did you take all this? I mean, all this trollers coming towards you like Dothrakis,
Yeah, well, I mean, look, a lot of the people I know in crypto are anonymous. I wouldn't say I was never a big name, but I liked, I don't like to be public, but I guess this is what you sign up for. But, we want to build a community, right. We want to build an open source community where people contribute to CommerceBlock. And that's one of the negatives. One of the positives is like yesterday I had 3 guys from Vietnam that were talking to me about some of the challenge they have in global trade, not having to use the dollar, and why Bitcoin solves a lot of problems. So that's one of the great things. You're meeting people around the world. I'm meeting you, for example, through this. So there is a lot of positives. We have a distributed team. We have a team in Israel. We have a team in New York. There's a lot of positives. I've met a lot of interesting people. So you have to take the good with the bad.
Well,
you have to take the good with the bad.
Well, I hope that answers everything, trollers. That he was simply practicing. He was just being Batman, that's all.
We all have our midlife crises, yeah? Maybe Bitcoin's one.
Yeah, let's not discuss the midlife crisis, otherwise people will start talking about that as well. So on that note, on that really amusing note, I think we can wrap this interview right now. It was really, really great speaking to you, Nicholas, and I hope that your project turns out to be the biggest success than you have ever imagined, and you have 0 competitors.
Thanks, I appreciate it. It's been good fun.
Well, nice meeting to you. See ya, man.
Thanks.